Welcome back to Lit versus Genre. I am Steve, representing the lit side.
And I am Jeff, representing genre.
Genre
Love that genre.
forever! Alright. Jeff, this one's been hyped. This one's been a long time coming. We finally get to see the man, the myth, the legend, the Gleeman.
Exactly.
And I noticed the
And
harp. We got a harp picture.
good.
So, though he does not play a harp, there's some juggling, as I recall. But I don't remember any musical abilities necessarily.
I believe there's a call for a harp. Um, but I could be wrong.
Dude, you are
Maybe,
so
maybe the
right.
pictures
It's one
make
of
that
those
up.
off-screen characters, right? Like it's like a
hmm
voice from the
Exactly.
crowd. It's like, give us the harp. It's like somebody shouting "Free Bird" in the background.
Exactly, which is brilliant. Number one, I do want to say I'm so glad that you are now taking the symbols into consideration. Really, changing the way you read drastically, I'm sure. But yeah, no, it's funny to go back to those like kind of off-camera people you've mentioned before. Now I have to find where that
Oh, I
line is,
got it
but I will be
highlighted.
looking.
It's highlighted. Don't even sweat it,
Oh,
bro.
did you? Okay,
Don't
perfect,
even sweat
perfect.
it.
We're good.
You know I highlight those off-screen characters, all of them.
Love it,
All right,
love it.
so let's start out with this first. So,
Let's
okay,
do it.
kind of breaking it down. Gleeman is like, it seems like he's gotten the boot, right? From the inn. Like he's gotten like
Mhm.
physically, it feels like he's gotten physically kicked out here, which maybe he didn't
Mhm.
physically kicked out, but Nenave came at him with like a club or something like that. And
Exactly.
okay, first question right off the bat, mustaches plural. What? So I'm
It's
imagining, I guess
that
he's
thick,
got those
bro.
kind of like very differentiated two
Right.
sides
Two
mustache.
sides.
But I have to say, I have never heard of that referred to as plural mustaches before.
I think it adds a level of clarity in its mystery.
Okay. I guess because he didn't want to say handlebar or something.
Exactly,
Mustache.
exactly. I mean, I do with the usage of mustaches, it does I do then think about both sides, right? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
they're both these big, thick, long mustaches. So I think it works here. I mean, I love that you highlighted it. It does work. I was waiting to see if you highlighted gnarled. I was waiting to see if you would be like, but wait, that's how we describe Senbui. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Describing him the same way.
He's leaning a little hard on that one, I'll say.
When I read it again, I was like, oh, Steve's gonna comment on that one right there.
I like that you're anticipating me now. That's exciting.
Yeah.
All right. So the other thing that is kind of interesting here is
hmm
that
hmm
Rand, I'm right about this, right? Rand has different color eyes than
He does.
everybody at the village.
Yep.
Alarm bells. See, Jeff, you're teaching me. I am learning to pick up on the clues to the fantasy mystery. Okay, so obviously he's like, I don't know. He's the godchild or whatever. Maybe Tam isn't even his dad or some. Who knows? You know,
Who knows?
but I do not know.
Yeah, the
But
who really just refers back to you and anyone else who hasn't read it yet. But yes, no, it's a fun little mystery there, and it again, I think it works because of character. If he just notices the blue eyes that the Gleeman has, then it's just sort of a regular description, like, oh, I'm someone looking at someone else, and I'm just going to note like three or four things about them: their hair color, their eye color, stuff like that, right?
mm,
How aged they are. But because Rand has been made fun of for his eye color, it is natural that he would then notice that about this individual and then think about it. So I think we're getting also not just some history, but again, character and almost character justification. Much like we talked before with the description of Moraine being dressed the way she was, it would make sense that that does not normally dress that way would notice that type of clothing. So, I just sort of appreciate these character-specific descriptions, and it puts us more in Rand's viewpoint, I feel like.
yeah. It's doing multiple things at one time, which is
Mhm.
what you want to do. But
Yep.
let's talk about doing the same thing he's been doing the whole book, and that is making fun of how young Nynaeve is. Because we get some more of that here. The Gleeman needs to comment on this in a kind of skeevy way, to be honest. Like she should be flirting with people. It's like, okay, old man, calm down, old man.
We didn't say with him, but sure.
It's true. And
he does say flirting with the young men.
That's true. Specific. That's true. And then, but I was kind of confused about why, like, so Perrin winced and Matt whistled, as if both had the same thought, which is they all hope Nynaeve hadn't overheard because she's so scary. Like, what? Just because she'd be mad at him even more than she already is? Like, is she actually somebody that people are, like, scared of?
That is what it's implying here. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Because I feel like you don't just kind of constantly nag on how young and inexperienced somebody is and then be like, ooh, but I'm really scared of her. I guess maybe this is a thing I'm not getting. Is there, like, a serious power level? Because, like, so far I've been like, wisdom, what can she do? I don't even remember. Like, she can, like, foretell the weather or some shit, and I'm like, yeah, cool, big deal.
Yeah, no,
so maybe I'm missing that, like, she's actually some force to be reckoned with here.
Well, I don't think it's a fantasy power thing, more just like a people thing, that it's where you say things about somebody you wouldn't want them to hear you say. One, because you just don't want them to hear it. Two, because in this case she's I don't think no we've seen her before, that she's got a sharp temper and bosses people around. So it's kind of like not wanting to get on her bad side kind of thing, just from a not because she can, like, roast you alive with fire or something, but just because that's the type of person she is.
Okay, now are you ready for this? I have indisputable proof that the Gleeman is a perv. Indisputable proof. I always choose the prettiest girl I can find as my assistant. Okay, so here's the play, and I like this narratively. I like that he's like, ooh, egg, I want you to be my assistant. That's kind of like the perfect thing to put Rand on the back foot and be like, oh dang. But really, he always picks the prettiest girl. Okay, I see you, old man.
I mean, I see this is a fairly classic magician trope.
Yeah, and magicians are skeevy.
Okay, well, I can't necessarily.
I'm planting my flag in the sand right there with that one.
I do want to point out one thing that I think is cool about this. I think it's right before we get into him picking up or asking Egg to help, is that we get to see that he's got his own perspective on things. That they're like, oh, we just heard stuff, and he's like, old news. And I just like the way that, one, he's got his own opinions about things. Like, he doesn't really like Pat and Fane and stuff like that. And so he strikes us more as a person, as opposed to just being like this narrative device who's coming in to give us information about the world. He, like, mocks their lack of knowledge about the world, creating this further separation between what Edmund's Field is and compared to everything else. And it just feels very much like he's got his own agenda. They ask him to tell them what's happening in the world. He's like, I'm not a newsmonger. I tell stories. You know what I mean? And just, like, I feel like we get this clear distinction of who he is pretty quickly from him resisting. And it made me think of something you talked about, which is, like, a character should never answer another character's question. I think that's a bit extreme, but I like the concept as it applies as we get here, where he refuses to answer their question because he's got his own things that he's interested in.
Yeah, we should probably explain that, because we're, like, cross-pollinating from another one of our YouTube videos here. But Jeff was just referring to a piece of writing advice that I had heard before, that for good dialogue, a character should never directly answer a question ever in good dialogue. And it's something that I kind of really believe. I maybe believe in the extreme form of that, of never doing.
Well, if we add in that word directly, then I think I'm all for it.
Okay.
Yeah, we can be answering, but in the way the character would answer it. You know what I mean? But in this case, we're getting an instance where he is directly not answering it. You know what I mean? Where he says, do I look like a peddler boy? I'm a Gleeman, not a newsmonger. I make it a point of never knowing anything about Aes Sedai. Much safer that way. So he's like directly avoiding answering that, which I think creates strong character, which is cool.
Yeah, yeah. I will say right at this point, I
Mm-hmm.
don't understand the point of having both the Gleeman and the Peddler. Like
Feels
what
redundant, right?
narrative function they play differently. And you even kind of notice in this chapter that the Peddler conveniently is the one dude who stays inside the inn when the rest of the council comes out. And Rand even supposes, oh, I guess he wanted to finish his wine or something. We'll find it. I highlighted it later. But like, I was looking at that and I'm just going, look, they're the same. They're doing the same thing. Like they're fulfilling the same function here. These two chapters. Why do they both exist?
Well, and that's the fun part about it is you're like, wait, what is the point of this, right? But at the same time, from like the character's perspective, they'd be excited for these people for different reasons. One, you can imagine that a peddler who goes around selling goods, I mean, in this case, supposedly is bringing fireworks, right, which is a big deal. They would be kind of like mini Gleeman, if you would. Like a peddler, especially going to a remote area, would get a lot of attention and tell about the world and like getting that. But they're not a true performer like someone who is an actual Gleeman who can, tell stories and juggle and things like that.
So a
And so
Gleeman
we're
light.
seeing like two different professions that sort of overlap in a way where they don't like each other because they do the same thing, but they're creating that conflict.
God, yeah. Okay. I'll buy that for now. I also get the feeling that the Gleeman, with his interaction with Moraine later, that like, there's something going on. They're in on that. They're in it together or something. I don't know, but we'll find out. Anyway, so this was the other thing. Probably the only real reason that I picked up on that eye color thing was because Jordan really wants me to know that Rand has different eye color than everybody else. Because even the Gleeman says he does. I'll wager. It's like, Gleeman, you even haven't seen everybody's eyes. But you're just betting. You're just betting here that there's something special about our boy Rand.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Tall, too.
I also...
Like the one of his mustaches. So, yeah, he's treating them as distinct units.
Right. But I still can't help the first time I read mustaches, I'm seeing like, does the dude have two mouths? Who knows? This is a fantasy world. Maybe it's possible to have two
I feel
mouths.
like that's always the argument with a fantasy. It's like, okay, I'm new, I'm going to get a fantasy. Anything is possible. So any word that they use, are they trying to tell me it's a two-mouthed Gleeman? You need two mouths to be a Gleeman and perform. Kind of makes sense, right? But no.
I know I'm fantasy paranoid now. I'm second guessing everything.
I really think that term should be coined. Fantasy paranoid. I never know if what they're telling me is real or means something else, right? That's awesome.
Okay, so another reason why, I kind of am getting the vibe that there's this Gleeman Moraine connection, but we'll see like more heavily later. But there's this interesting parallel in how Matt says mistress master when he's not supposed to. With both of them, and kind of is awkward and trips over his words. And again, I mean, that makes sense for both characters because he kind of holds both in esteem. But I just thought that was a very interesting parallel. It's like, I think this like line is directly repeated from when he called Moraine a lady. He called her not mistress, but lady.
Right. Well, and also too, there's a couple of them I feel like that are trying to figure out what to call him, since he says, just call me Marilyn, right? And then they still go with like Master Gleeman, and then he's like Tom Marilyn. I guess that is the one right after. Yeah.
Which is kind of just the exact same thing Moraine said. Like,
no, you're right. It is.
So I'm picking up on stuff. I'm not fantasy paranoid, at least not completely.
Now we get to the part that I'm speaking of me like thinking about, what you might discuss, I'm fascinated to hear your reactions to these pages.
Yeah, so you know I'm interested in mainly the egg stuff right here. So
Right.
basically, what kind of happens is, well, let's hold on for this. Like, also putting a lot
Hmm.
of emphasis on that Rand is taller than everybody else, along with
Right.
having different color eyes. I was super confused by this line right here.
Mm. Oh,
So
the
Egg
highlighted one
cuts
above that.
in
Yep.
because Matt says they're talking about like how removed they are from everywhere else.
Hmm.
Nobody goes over the mountains. Nobody goes through
Yep.
the forest. Blah blah blah. It's bad luck to enter the mountains. And then Matt says, "Oh no!" Egg says that's just foolishness about the mountains. Nenave says, and then she doesn't say anything else. Her
Hmm.
cheeks turn pink. And then suddenly she's like against Thom
Hmm.
after that. It's not right to make. It isn't. Her face went redder. And then Matt knows what's going on. And I'm like, Matt knows way better what's going on than I do right here. As he was just getting a suspicion of what had been going on. And I'm like, Matt, tell me. Please tell me what had been going on here. Because this I don't get.
Right.
She's mad at the Gleeman for talking about how cut off they are or something.
Yeah, so that's what's happening. He's basically making fun of them when he goes as far as that. Um, so he's like mocking them for like they've gone further than people in their village, but that's still, nothing. They
Right.
haven't gone to like
Right.
any big cities or anything. So he's like, oh, as far as that. And then Matt is defending himself. Well, like everybody knows it's bad luck to go on mountains. And then Egwene cuts in and is like, that's so she's initially responding to Matt, being like, that's foolish. And Nave says, and so she's about to like parrot something the wisdom says. Then she stops and realizes that the Gleeman is just making fun of them all. And then she starts to like sputter that it's not cool what he's doing, but she can't get that all out. And then he apologizes.
Oh, I'm here to entertain. All right. I mean, it just seemed like. I guess I don't know why she gets so. I don't know. I don't know. So it's all just about like. This is all just emphasizing that Egg wants to go on adventures and travel herself.
Um,
Maybe.
Maybe. I feel like that happens a little bit more. I thought there was actually a later part in this that might be something that's confusing. I do agree here that the Nynaeve says could then make you think the things she says after that is what Nynaeve would say. But I think that could be potentially creating some confusion. I think if
I mean,
that Nynaeve says had been maybe something else.
even if she goes with these ellipses, it's not right to make fun or something.
Right.
But to go, it's not right to
Right.
make. And then
Right.
that is so open. You're like, well, maybe she's saying
Right.
make fun, but maybe
Yeah.
she isn't. And like, why wouldn't you put that word? Like, even if you're the character and you're having the thought and you're cutting yourself off, it's a weird place to cut off, I guess. But maybe I just read too far into it by like a ton or something because I'm fantasy paranoid.
Um,
See, that's why
I
this
mean,
is happening.
well, I think in this case, it's sort of what we were talking about before, where like characters aren't directly saying everything, like they're not just laying it out. And don't get me wrong, this is not giving us as much as most authors would, right? Most authors would definitely say it's not right to make fun, right? And then
Mm.
the dot dot dot, right? But here, doesn't want to do that. Jordan wants you to figure out that it's Egwene saying like it's not right to make fun of people. So it's definitely
I mean, I
I
guess,
think a
but like,
bold.
what's good about that? Like, what
Mhm.
what like extra? I don't know narrative purpose or what does that serve to like it almost feels like there's like a reflexive holding stuff back or making me guess, which I'm not I do get like me having to guess sometimes is fun and figure it
Right.
out, but like even something like that small, like what's the do you
Mhm.
hear what I'm
I
saying?
No, no, I do. I do. I mean, don't get me wrong. I have absolutely read stories where I'm like, why are you're just holding this back to hold back? There's like no good
Right,
reason
right.
to hold it back. Um, Here, though, I think it's a desire to make the dialogue sound more realistic,
Mm.
that she is talking to someone that is, I don't want to say her superior, but like someone that's supposed to be treated with respect. Like Gleeman are, going to be the talk of the town for the next like decade or whatever if one comes, because they're that big a deal. And so it's meant to show that she feels like she's just a kid and she cues him directly of doing something wrong. So she's angry, but she's cutting herself off from directly saying you're doing something bad, but she wants to. And that's why her face gets redder, because she's like battling with herself to call out like an adult, you know what I mean, an authority figure. And so that's that. I think that's what that's meant to show, is this like disparity between their like social status.
Yeah, I guess the other thing is I just don't. I'm not getting how much of a tease this was of what the Gleeman said, because it's kind of
Right.
what they all say anyway. They even at the end go like, "Yeah, we haven't been anywhere, so we want to join this watch or whatever it is, or this what's the word where they're going out, they're going to patrol or whatever." So I
Right,
guess I
right,
just
they're gonna-
didn't even like read like, oh, and I see like Rand's certain they're the butt of the joke now, but I guess like maybe if he was being a bit more biting in his teasing here, that might have made a little bit more sense to me. Okay. Anyway.
Actually, yeah, the butt of the joke part is earlier, so that I think that's meant to help. And then also when the Gleeman says like, "I apologize," I think that's it. I mean, I hear it. It's not overt. It's definitely a subtle choice, and like how much does it benefit the narrative? You know, I don't know. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think it's kind of an interesting, argument point with this one, that I can see both sides, but I enjoyed it. But it is pretty darn subtle
All
and
right.
takes some work.
All right. Moving on. The
No, we're just
Gleeman.
gonna stay on this the rest of the time. Yeah. This is
This one
actually,
paragraph is what it's all about.
I,
This episode. This one paragraph right here.
I did think we'd talk about that one some, but actually the stuff I thought we'd really talk about is coming up. So
Right.
let's do
So
it.
we get some more. We get some of his stories, or at least
Yes.
like the headlines, the titles
Mhm.
of his
Mhm.
stories.
Yes,
And then so then Egg pulls an interesting move of yelling out,
Mhm.
"Tell us about Len. Tell us about Salia." Okay, and then Rand has an interesting like reaction to this.
Yes.
Rand claims she had never liked stories about adventure and long journeys. Okay. Her favorites were always the funny ones, the ones about women outwitting people. Okay. He was sure she asked for tales about Len and Salia to put a burr in his shirt. So, way I'm reading this right now is that so the stories she's requesting then are funny ones, or a story about a woman outwitting someone, because you just told me those are her favorites, unless he's wrong about those being her favorites. But he just told me that those are her favorites, and now he's sure that she asked for them. So, but if she was asking the opposite of what she wants, if she was asking for adventure, why would that put a burr in his shirt? Because of course his stories, I'm assuming, are going to be about adventures and journeys. So here are the two possibilities, right? She's either asking for funny stories, and that I could be like, okay, maybe that puts a burr in his shirt because he wants to tell adventure stories. Or Rand's completely wrong. He thinks she likes funny stories. She actually likes adventure stories. She's asking for an adventure story, but she doesn't want to really hear an adventure story. She just wants to put a burr in his shirt. I don't actually know how I'm supposed to tell which one is the correct interpretation
So yeah,
of those
this
two.
was the paragraph that I thought we would talk about, because it's this is a tricky one. This is like, wait a second, wait, what? And of course, what's making it tricky is we don't know anything about Len.
Right.
um,
Or saw you.
or flying over the moon in a belly of an eagle, right?
That sounds like a
Um,
journey.
but
It
right?
sounds like a
Two
journey. It
things.
sounds like an adventure to me.
Exactly. Sounds like an adventure, and it is a he, right?
Hmm.
It's a he flying to the moon in a belly made of an eagle of fire. So that's what reveals to us that she is asking for a story about adventure. Moran knows that she normally doesn't
Oh,
ask for stories for adventure.
Is Salia not a female?
Well, she says, yeah,
His
I mean, the
daughter.
daughter Sally would be a female, but she's still
So she's
walking among the
not
stars. So
entire.
that
She's
wouldn't
not
make
just
sense.
asking for a dude story. She's asking for a dude
True,
and a
true.
girl.
But we are getting stories about like adventure, it sounds like, not stories that are funny or about outwitting people that are supposed to be smarter than
I don't
everyone.
know
Now, again, we don't know
that could be
for sure.
hilarious. What do I that?
Right. I know. I'm saying I agree. We don't know for sure,
Okay,
right?
okay.
Like maybe the story about the daughter Salia, you know, maybe is interacting with people.
Mm.
But if it's Len who flew to the moon and then he's in the moon and then he had a daughter and his daughter walks among the stars, it's presumably not around people. Again, we don't know for sure, but it does seem as if
Oh.
these are stories about adventure. And Rand's being like, what? Why is she asking about a story about adventure? She never likes adventure stories. She's just doing that to mess with me because we just had the conversation about her leaving the two rivers. And she's like needling me about that through the Gleeman.
Oh, so a burr in Rand's shirt.
Yes.
See, it all comes down to pronouns in the end, Jeff. Do
That's a big one.
not watch your ambiguous pronouns, y'all. That's my biggest piece of writing advice out there for all y'all. Watch your ambiguous pronouns. Okay, yeah. So, and I get that, and that was what I was kind of more leaning to. But the paragraph I thought was confusing because I don't know what that story is, of course.
Right.
And
Exactly.
and B, I see like again Rand's sort of wishful thinking here. Surely she could see the world outside was no place for Two Rivers folks. Again, I feel like that's partly his genuine opinion, but also partly like self-serving. He just doesn't want her to leave.
Totally. Totally.
And all right, cool. Okay, I got it now. I got it now.
That's a tricky one though. Like seriously, as I was reading it, I was like, oh, so those are not stories of adventure. But then it got put a burr under his shirt, and I was like, wait, why would he be mad about that? Wait, I guess they are stories of adventure. You know what I mean? So yeah, like
Well, the
definitely
reason I
it
thought it
takes
was the Gleeman shirt is because everybody's trying to egg on the Gleeman and be like, tell this one, tell this one, tell this one. You know?
right,
So
right.
like I don't know. I don't know why my mind wandered away from her trying to intentionally piss off Rand here, but it was just not there. It was just not there.
I hear you. Well, I think one of the reason we might have thought that was because of the other paragraph, right? That we were just spending some time on. That if she's mad at the Gleeman, it could make sense that she's trying to
Right, mess with them.
pardon me, put a burr in the Gleeman's shirt, right?
Right.
But then the only way that would work is if she's trying to say stories that he doesn't know, and he does say old stories, those. But then he's like, I got all stories. So I can see how someone could go down the line of like she's trying to mess with the Gleeman by bringing up a story that he won't know. But I think the evidence around it supports the other.
Yeah. I'm down with that interpretation now. Okay, so one of the stories, he kind of drops right here is the one that actually everybody wants to hear. It's kind of funny he like drops it because he goes through like how many different possible stories, like 20.
That's what
There's
I
like
want to ask you about.
there's
How
paragraph.
much did you just check out during
Oh
his
yeah,
listing of
I cannot tell you anything about any of the other stories. I have no idea. Oh,
That's that was the other big.
I did
Sorry,
recognize
go
there
ahead.
was something about Trollocs, right, which we've heard before, I
Yep.
think, and there was the Ogier and Elil. Those words come up again somewhere, right? Ogier, I
Yep.
can't remember where, but somewhere. So I did note those. I was like, okay, these are things that have been dropped. Lots of
Yep.
arters, which made me think of like interesting, like made me think of like King Arthur, type stuff.
Right.
But all those stories, if you're in this town and you're sitting there and listening to all those stories are like meaningless to you. You don't care about those. Like you want the dragon story, and he gets down here to the dragon story, and everybody's like, yeah, that's the one, the Aes Sedai, that's the one we want to hear, bro. Tell us this one. But then I also love this is my favorite story, how Goodwife Carol cured her husband of snoring. That's the second to the last story that he hypes up here. That's fantastic.
Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing? So I want to point something out with the stories, right? So we kick off with stories, and his first paragraph of stories is like, you want stories? I've got stories. And then he just starts talking about crazy stuff that we've basically never heard of.
Yeah.
We do get the Aiel, which we saw the Aiel brought up when Rand said, I'm sorry, when Tom just said that Rand was as tall
as one, right?
Right. So we're getting a little something there, right? And we do get of warders and Trollocs. So, we have seen that. But otherwise, this paragraph mainly, I mean, Arathoshan maybe, but this is mainly new stuff. And we're like, oh, he's got these crazy stories. But then we get into...
Be real. How much of this stuff is never unpacked?
Never talked about, right? But then we get like Tales of Moss the Giant, so on and so forth. But it's not until we get to this last one where we sort of get the chronology of what's happened. Where he says, I will tell you the end of the Age of Legends, of the dragon, his attempts to free the Dark One from the world of man. And we're like, wait, that's like tying back to the prologue. I will tell the time of madness. When, again, tying back to the prologue, when Aes Sedai shattered the world, the Trolloc Wars and Men Battled Trollocs. So right there, we finally get sort of like the timeline that happened. So I was wondering how much, again, you checked out, because there is all this like extra content. But I almost feel as if Jordan had to prove that this world is rich with stories, and it's not just this one story about the dragon breaking the world that happens.
Right.
But this guy knows all these various stories. But he had to prove that with these other initial paragraphs. Is it too much? I don't know. But I was, like I said, interested to hear your reaction to that and talk about how Jordan structured this.
I was okay with it. I would have liked a few more of these, how Goodwife Carol cured her husband of snoring, mixed in, Okay, let's talk about this sentence too, because this is a weird way of putting it. Free the Dark One into the world of men. That doesn't, well, first, free into. Right. If that showed up in a sentence correction problem on the GMAT, I would be like, no, that's wrong. Like, free into, how do you free into something? You free from something. Right. So, free the Dark One into, you'd be like, no, we don't want the Dark One here. Don't free him into here. So this is like, so I'm supposed to pick up on that's very odd wording, and like destabilizes the reading of what was happening before.
Yeah, it seems like from at least this line that the dragon's doing something terrible if they're freeing the Dark One from whatever the Dark One was into the world of men, because that would be awful.
Yeah, that's bad. All right. Okay, so I'm glad I didn't completely misread that one. All right. So now Moraine
We've also
shows
seen
up.
different people have different opinions about the dragon, though. I think that's important to keep in mind as well, right? That there's people that curse the dragon. There's people that have like stories like this about the dragon. There's people saying the dragon is needed, so. Yeah.
Right. So basically we have on record that the Gleeman is pro Dark One. He's down with the Dark One.
They got a record that he's got a story where it seems like the dragon did something really, really bad.
He's Team Dark One. I'm calling it right now. All right.
He's a dark friend, is what you're going for?
Yeah, Dark Friends. Dark Friends. He is part of the Dark Friends super team. And that would also explain, like, at least maybe why there seems to be some friction here between him and Moraine. And so Moraine shows up, and what is she like? She's like, your stories are nonsense. What does she say? She doesn't really say anything, right? She just shows up, and then Ewan is like, call her lady or whatever. He calls her out because he sees her, and then Ewan, who's super protective, is like, call her lady. And
Mhm.
she says she does nag on his stories though, doesn't she, in some way?
I
Maybe
think
not.
she says the world can be a dangerous place for one as a stranger. Oh, right, right. Some stories I like and some I do not.
Right, right, right. Which I felt like had a bit of connotation there. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, but then you get this line, accepting an offering from one of her subjects, which okay is pretty literal, making it sound like this dude's just like
Mm-hmm.
in league with her. Then at that point, or it
Mm-hmm.
could just be a
Right.
metaphor or whatever. But it's kind of
Right.
like I'm getting these weird signals where he's not happy she's there for whatever reason.
Right.
He looked not best pleased to find her there. But then
Mm.
he kind of gives her this big bow, blah 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 gesture, which maybe even feels
Right.
kind of sarcastic a little bit. And then she's like, "Okay, I'm accepting it." And then they like, but Rand also says in his mind he's not pleased at all
Right.
about her. So yeah, they seem to be like frenemies at best.
Yeah, I mean, he bows to her because it, again, trying to show this station thing and, her being seemingly above everyone there, that, as a lady, that Gleeman would bow to her.
Mm.
But yeah, they don't seem to be good friends or happy with each other.
Right. And so then he just jumps off. Here's the thing
Mhm.
where I have like
The hunt.
Rand just imagines that
Mhm.
that what's his face is drinking it up in there, and then like in the very next
Right.
sentence, Tom's like, "I'm out. I'm gonna
Right.
get something to drink." This very brief interaction with Moraine has affected me so much. I'm now going to go get
Exactly.
wasted, and he and he takes off.
Exactly.
All right.
Which I love. Which I love. And then we get perhaps the greatest line. Well, actually, it's before that. The harp, play the harp.
Yeah, there it is.
Someone
Let's
called,
highlight
and then someone else called for the flute. So we are getting the music there.
it. Team harp versus team flute. So what it's really going to come
Yep.
down to, I think, in the end.
The picture for the next chapter.
All right. So now Nynaeve comes out after like
Mhm.
annoying everybody at the council so much that they have to leave. Um, and so what is this line that I have highlighted? Bran's like annoyed at the Gleeman for some reason that I don't really understand why they're all so annoyed. Like Sen and Bran are so annoyed with the Gleeman, but they are. And then the Knave says, "At least he is in Edmondsfield, which is more than you can say for this false dragon. But as long as you are worrying, there are others here who should accept your worry." So she's saying, at least he is in Edmondsfield. So, okay, you're worrying about him. I'm cool with the fact that you're worrying about him because at least then you're not worrying about the dragon, who I think is no big deal because he's not even here. But
Mhm.
I'm also worrying. You should also be worrying about some other people. So,
Right.
okay, so the battle
Right.
lines are pretty clearly drawn here. The knave is in league with the Gleeman. Gleeman. Here's what I'm saying. Gleeman's bad. Nynaeve's bad.
Okay.
Moraine Len good. Nynaeve's sitting here going like, "Don't worry about the Gleeman because the Gleeman's on my side. Don't worry about the dragon." So Nynaeve's pro dragon. This is Team Dragon. I'm sorting it out. We got Team Dragon
Obviously.
on this side. We
Team,
got
team False
Team
Dragon.
Team Rand or whatever, Team Good Guys on the other side. And Nynaeve feels like she's pro dragon, she's pro Gleeman, she's anti Moraine and Lan, and so the battle lines are drawn. Have I
No,
put it
definitely
together? Have
don't.
I masterfully uh, put all the pieces
Well,
together?
I will agree that the battle lines have been drawn for sure, for sure.
All right. Yeah, everybody hates
I was
Nynaeve.
wondering if you were going to comment on the Aiel had been kind of brought up a lot more suddenly, because this one felt a little forced to me, like stop acting like a black veiled Aiel,
Mm,
because we just got the Aiel mentioned in the stories
mm.
saying that Rand is as tall as one, and so I wonder if that like name drop, you're like, okay,
That didn't
and it's
bother me
important.
so much. The eyes came out of nowhere this chapter and got said twice,
Mm,
and the taller than everybody else. I feel like this was the chapter where like you could have been sprinkling that a little bit earlier, how he's a little out of place physically or whatever with the rest of the town. And it like really got hit hard here, where I was like, that, I don't know. I think that could have been, for as subtle as he is on other things, I feel like that one could have been a bit more subtle.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, he does mention the tall, but you're right. The eyes are more of a focus now. Where it's interesting, we didn't get that as much in, say, the land one, because even in this chapter, he thinks like maybe land came from the same area. So it's like he could have potentially had that thought when he saw land, not now when he sees the Gleeman, you know? So anyway.
All right. So then what happens next? I don't have anything highlighted on these pages.
What?
But I think like they sort of have this idea that they should tell the mayor about the man in black. And then they're both like, well, we need to get some other witnesses here besides mainly Matt, because Matt, you're an idiot and nobody believes you because you know, put flour on dogs and stuff like that. And they're like, okay, that's a good plan. We're going to do that. Maybe before that happens, Rand's dad comes and says, hey, we're getting the heck out of here. And Rand's like, what the heck? We're going to miss something. I don't even remember what they're going to miss. But so they're like, okay, we'll figure this out tomorrow. We'll go to the mayor when we have some more people on board. Anything else kind of important you think happened there?
No, that's what's going on.
All
right. What I'm interested in is there was a comment you had made previously about, why did the village council take the peddler away? Like it seemed like much, and and then we got people complaining about it. And then in this part, it's answered. And so I was wondering if that worked for you.
Well, it's answered, but it's answered with the exact complaint that I made, that we already like heard everything. And like there was no reason for them to take him away. Like there was nothing more to kind of like get out of him or whatever, unless they're like lying that he didn't really tell them anything more. But
the idea that they plant here is that they took him away so it could be perceived that the village council are taking charge of it, as opposed to people continuing to ask questions, even if it is just Pat and Fane regurgitating the same stuff. But if people got to keep asking questions, they would spin themselves out and get really like freaked out and everything. But if they're kind of cut off from the source.
The argument was Bran brings up all the stuff to be like ahead of the story. This is kind of a thing that I also don't understand, like in politics, when people are like, ooh, we want to get ahead of the story by saying all the bad stuff first. And it's like, wait, what, does that really help? Is there any data on this, that this is really like a good strategy?
I don't know if they've crunched the numbers that have been spewed about this. But I think the idea is that they want to show like, here could be the bad things and we're going to take care of it. And you elected us to take care of it. So that's what we're going to go do. Okay. So, I mean, I'm not saying that it's necessarily a plan that works. But I thought it was interesting that at least the plan was discussed from like the village council perspective.
Yeah, it feels to me like blocking, honestly. Like he wanted, to get rid of these adults so we could just have the kids again and, get Egg up in here and then get the Gleeman up in here with them. And so I needed an excuse to have the adults all go off. But in the end, so now that there wasn't a real good reason for that, we're going to fabricate this. Ooh, this is a part of our master plan to keep the town in check. All right. I'm fine with it.
Well, I was just think it's interesting, an author doing that or not, right? Because some authors just wouldn't have even addressed it, right? It'd be like, oh, you're a kid, you don't get to find out. But I think it's cool that even if we don't agree with the council's reason, or it does feel like blocking, I do think we get to see something about the relationship between Tam and Rand. That Tam gives Rand insight into like why the council does what they do. But like, I hear you. It probably was indeed a blocking reason. But I can appreciate at least the explanation being there and the character stuff being there.
Yeah. And I want to talk a bit more about Rand and his dad in a second, because I think that relationship is cool. And I could buy that kind of cements that they have like a pretty open relationship, which feels a little different than like kind of a typical maybe father-son type thing. But let's talk about, but okay, justify this for me, Jeff. The
to it. What you
horses
got?
all look like the people they belong to. What?
Oh yeah.
No.
Welcome.
No.
Welcome to Fantasyland.
So this
I
hails back
mean,
to like Califax or something. Like your horse just has to. Like when I read this, I was like, oh, this is when people talk about people starting to look like their pets,
I was
right?
gonna say this is a total pet thing, right? I mean, I think some of it does make sense in that just money-wise, like it would make sense that Lan and Moraine's horses are nicer
Mm,
than Tom's, right?
yeah.
Because Tom is a Gleeman and he does seem self-important, but like, he's not like he's dressed in a Gleeman way, but not necessarily fancy. How much money does he really have? So
Mm,
I think you can go with like one of them is not as nice. So I think that's cool.
yeah.
But in terms of like and then I think you can sell the war horse because if Lan is a warrior, it would make sense that he needs a bigger horse. But at the very graceful the horse, I think that does trend into Fantasyland a little bit. But it's also an aesthetic, right? Like people do get to pick their horse, so the way their horse looks tells you about their character. You know what I mean? Like the fact that Moraine wanted a horse that looked like that, I think says something.
That is kind of interesting. I want like I've never honestly thought about that before, but like back in the day, that would be like your
Sure. Yeah.
status symbol or whatever. Or that would be like your
Mhm.
aesthetic kind of
Mhm.
fashion thing, just like what car you buy or whatever. Of course it
Yeah.
is.
So
So
I think there is some justification for
all
it.
right, all right. I was just ready to go on. Really? They look like the
I mean,
horses.
if Tom's horse had two thick mustaches, then I would agree. It's too much.
He missed it. He missed his chance. It was right there.
Uh,
All right. So you see, I did highlight those things about like not
there we
totally
go.
buying
Yeah.
brands thing
Oh,
right here.
that's what they're.
But
This is the BS reasoning that.
yeah, so we get that out of the way, and then Dad
Right.
drops the bomb, which is,
Yeah.
oh, I actually believe you about this man in black.
Hmm.
And only other people have seen it, but only young men see it.
Right.
And all right, that's very interesting. Now, already, I don't know, but then Dad's like, oh, maybe it's just a thief, maybe it's somebody trying to escape the war. The odds on this is a strange correlation, right? Like if it's a random real dude, what are the odds that only young men see this thing?
Oh,
Like
totally.
you
Totally.
got to be like, no, that's a mystical mf'er right there.
No, I hear that. I think now is where we're getting into. It's not. I can't call it. Oh, what is it? Unreliable narrator. But it's like an unreliable character. Like it could be a dad just trying to be a dad, coming up with a
Mm-mm.
reason to like mollify Rand and make
Right.
him not as worried.
But that kind of
Um,
butts against what I was just going to say that I feel like is kind of
mhm,
cool about them is that like Tam is above the board and
right.
willing to tell his son all this stuff and like,
Yeah.
say, "Oh, this is what the council is really doing.
Hmm.
This is
Hmm.
what is really going on. Here's our plan." It just seems like he's like very forthright in
Right.
everything.
Which is right.
So I don't know if I read that as him trying to protect Rand in some way. I kind of feel like if they're like, this thing's a killer demon, he'd be like, we gotta get ready for killer demon right here. Although he
Well, I
does seem
think.
kind of freaked out. Oh, am I reading ahead? Oh, I may be reading ahead a little bit, but he does seem kind of freaked out when they're like scanning the farm when they get back home. But we
Oh
got
yeah,
it.
yeah.
We'll
So
save
that's
that.
gonna be a little bit ahead. But I was gonna say for this, I mean, I think it also ties back to what we saw in chapter one, where Rand was freaked out on the walk, and Tam was like the rock beside him.
Mm,
That and it's described that things could go crazy, and Tam would still just be a rock about it, like he would be so stable. And so I think that that's what we're seeing here with. Rand says, like festival, if you had seen him, you wouldn't want him closer than 10 miles, 100 maybe. Like, so Rand's, now that he knows his dad believes him, he's willing to say his fears about how
mm,
scary this guy is.
mm.
And then Tam says, perhaps so placidly, he could just be a refugee, So I think for someone like Tam, he's going to entertain all logical possibilities because he's a very sort of steadfast individual. So I think it could be that he's trying not to stress the sun out. It could be just because that's how he views the world, and that's the way we've seen him in chapter 1. But like you, the main thing that I think is so great about this relationship is how open he is with his son. And I feel like this is all of a sudden we now know why Rand views Tam the way he does. And Tam is really kind of stepping into his own right as a character, because he was kind of like a mystery before. It's not like he had spent a lot of time with him. He's got this void thing, which is different. So he's already kind of an outsider with the rest of the town. And then now he's just being like really open and honest with his son, which is pretty cool.
Which is especially admirable considering that Rand is not really his son. Boom.
Well, on that note,
he's Pa-Kenting it right here.
Perfect. We shall see.
We shall see. Okay. Any other thoughts about this one, Jeff?
Honestly, I think that's a great ending. I mean, the only other one that's tempting me is it's super heartwarming for me. Is when Tim says, "So you keep a sharp eye. Maybe I'll catch sight of him too if he shows up again." Being like, I'm here to help you. So not only is he being supportive, not only is he being honest and open, but he's also being like, I believe in you, I trust you, like, I want to help you. So I just thought that's like a nice moment there. And then we see, Rand having that, and you see this big up. Okay, I'm lying. There is something I think is interesting. The chapter ends with this kind of big up, where Rand's like, there's nothing that we can't handle together, right? And it's like,
no, there's like quite a lot of things, and I'm sure the Gleeman can tell you about 400 stories of things that you can't handle together.
Perhaps. But yeah, so I think that's just, I think that this is a great end to the chapter to really, we get this heartwarming moment, but then we get Rand saying something that seems foolishly optimistic. Where's it going to go?
Yeah, it's not the first time he's suddenly been like a lot more optimistic suddenly at the end of the chapter. But
we shall see.
We shall see, my friend. Okay, we will cut it there. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be back next time with chapter 5.
Thanks all. We'll see you for Winter Night.